Hi friends, this is Yoga Light. Today we are looking at Kundalini symbolism, powers and experiences as part of a broad overview of the physical practices of yoga. Let's describe the origination of the cosmos. I use the word description because it isn't really a belief. To me, belief is something that I hold true. Instead, the idea is that the description is useful and has some measure of truth within it. In this way, I can use contradicting descriptions if they are helpful for understanding practice and relating to the results. They can change. That is their value. They also help cut through religiosity and hyperbole. Reason is not the highest form of understanding, but it is all we have at first, and we often have to be ready to transcend seeming mental contradictions, such as the absolute, which determines everything, and the free play of forces, which gives creative possibilities and individual determinations. Existence is both. There is oneness and multiplicity. To simplify, we are moving from a transcendent and supreme consciousness to a world of ignorance that condenses into matter. We move from being to becoming. This is the movement into the expression of time and space. Three main ideas are at play. The first is that the world is a series of layers or gradations. We describe our human range as nature taking part in these layers in terms of the koshas and chakras. The second is that these layers also exist in parallel, meaning that there are worlds or universes of subtle existence that operate under their own laws. These influence our physical world. They are infinite in number and span the heights and depths of the gradations of consciousness. There are many themes, forces, and possibilities, all with their own histories, futures, beings, gods, and even different physics. These can be experienced in out-of-body experiences, dreams, or meditation, and sometimes they are symbolically represented. These many worlds have influence. If you think of the world of a movie, there is behind it all the worlds of production, the cinematographer and camera support, all the editing, all the financing, the food preparation for the crew, and the insurance, the personal lives of the cast and crew. These may not appear in the movie, but decisions based on these complex factors can influence the final outcome, or if a critical piece is lacking, it may not be made, yet it still exists in terms of scripts or conversations and in the minds of the creators. All the many possibilities. There is even a world of what could have been. At various times, these worlds have more or less influence. They all have their own unique laws, or one might think of the physics as in a video game engine. There is the math of finance, the taste of choice, the egos, and the drama of personality disputes. Our human form is a limited expression of the possibilities of these layers. Just as we move from our sense awareness to all vast realms of the material world revealed by science, we have even more layers of vast subtle worlds connected to the layers of consciousness making up our being. The third is that the layers descend. They are characterized by differentiation or fragmentation. Behind all appearances, the essential substance or being is still the supreme. At the highest level, there is an essential unity, shared awareness, and knowledge of oneness. This is the realm of the gods and goddesses, which are personalities of the divine. They have a particular area of work. They are a type of knowledge, will, and force that contributes to the movement of the whole. They are intimately involved in the universe. Lesser gods and goddesses exist in all planes, with a scope of power and knowledge appropriate to the principle of that subtle realm. There is a true vision of the whole to be accomplished. There is a secret purpose and direction to the becoming. The universe is moving towards realization just as individuals are, as they are actually one and the same. The vision can be lost or distorted, dimmed in ignorance. It can be left to be worked out between a bewildering host of competing forces and agendas. We have to reconcile the contradiction between an absolute determinism at the top and a play of creative possibilities and ignorance below. Each deity connects to something beyond them, a direct connection to the divine of which they are an aspect. In the symbolism of the chakras, we see that a male and female deities rules each center of consciousness. In symbolism, the male represents the will force or intent, and the female represents the power and forms of action to fulfill that intent. The lingam represents the will intent of the supreme. The presence of the lingam means that the will of the deity is active in the world. At each level there is a divine truth and power present. The deity in the chakra represents the spiritual import, knowledge, and action at that level and subtle plane of consciousness. As we descend through the layers, we enter into ignorance, where there is no longer a direct awareness of the One. Each individual force seems to act and react independently. In human terms, we identify with the ego, the body, and the instruments, like our emotions and thoughts. We often have little control and struggle with our own minds, emotions, and bodies. From the heights to the depths, it is still the essential substance. It is still the divine and an aspect of the oneness. Each form in the multiplicity contains the full power of being, though this is veiled and only slowly emerges after eons of time. The Maha Kundalini would represent the universal aspect of evolution. When we think of the universal, I like to use the example of a severed arm. Is it possible to regrow an arm? Well, perhaps, but no one has done it. There is no known pathway for it to occur. If you were to do it, then it would be true for everyone. Anyone could potentially do it. If you have a solid will to regrow your arm, then the universe could manifest that possibility. For that will to be effective, it would have to overcome human nature, and for that kind of force there would need to be a larger truth with the knowledge and will to manifest. The aspiration to regrow a limb could also cause the world to respond and produce a technology that allows for the growth of the replacement arms. But notice, for the world to do this, there needs to be pressure, money invested, and research done. This will or vision to achieve something is still the basis. It would be a large movement. It would be miraculous. It is the need for something that is important. Does it fulfill that which is needed? We will explore this more when we look at surrendering to the divine will. The universe would have to change, and many forces would be involved. If we look at the individual, then mending a broken bone is already well known. Anyone can potentially heal the bone. With Kundalini ascending and transforming the individual, it moves up a path already well established in human possibility. The Kundalini can then unfold our individual potential that is part of the paths already well trodden, but it potentially can be part of the universal evolution as well. For instance, Hatha Yoga's physical postures are well known from ancient times. Various teachers in the past were known to move spontaneously in meditation, coming into various poses or poses with specific mudras. These are known as prana-kriyas. This occurs to ordinary practitioners in some traditions, especially during meditation. Even a person who has never done any physical practices can, in rare instances, end up in a headstand. The pose or poses are used to purify and perfect the subtle body. Often the person falls into a deep elative trance and then returns to the waking consciousness in these poses, perhaps without remembering how they got there. The prana causing the body to move also affects other koshas, and it can be that a heart change will have a physical change as well. This is the origin of the physical practice, which is the energy moving the body rather than a product of mental reflection such as kinesiology. There is a wisdom in the physical consciousness that can be awakened. The Kundalini can also manifest new possibilities on a universal level, new relationships between the subtle body and the physical. As an evolutionary change in one kosha will change the others. New types of physical practices can emerge directly from the action of the Kundalini. These have far-reaching consequences that are not immediately apparent, as these new relationships are not just at the physical and pranic levels, but influence all the koshas. Things such as dietary changes across cultures and economies, affecting climate as people are drawn towards different lifestyles, values, and awareness. The new connections in the subtle body also require innovations in practice. New evolutionary emergents are always preparatory to an even greater becoming. Further, these are not limited to physical transfer. It is not a question of one person starting it, but rather a change that happens, and initially people are symbols, forerunners, where the universal change first occurs. It is a larger movement. As these new pathways emerge, they can manifest across people through connections in the subliminal, people who have never met or communicated physically. It depends on the receptivity of the people and the needs for their growth. The initial people may represent specific parts of the change that have to work out so that others will be opened. Consider why the Vedic age was so important. Most people have been conditioned to consider evolution only in terms of the physical, or reject it in favor of a religious story. Darwinian evolution with natural selection works very well to describe physical forms. It has a great predictive power, but there is more going on, and for me, yoga, unlike scientific investigation, assumes there is a purpose. There is a level of special insight where someone can see what is needed for further growth. This comes in a vision of a practice that can include breath, posture, movement, mudra, and mantra. They are like recipes. These can be individual, only needed by that person, or universal in that they work for anyone who does the practice. The insight may only be effective within certain ranges of consciousness. Someone might see what is effective for emotional development, but not for divine contact. This is often more than revealed knowledge, as the person it is intended for will actually do the practice and get the result. There is a will for manifestation behind it. This is more likely to arise if you have done practices that establish and develop links across the different koshas. It is good to remember that teachers come for and are often effective with certain groups of people. They address a practical need for that group and their development. They bring what is needed for a certain kind of progress. They are often limited by the receptivity of the people and the world conditions. Some teachers bring new things and will have various universal types of people around them to aid in the working out of the pathways. When we cover the 10 forms of consciousness, we can see different ways of describing life's possibilities for spiritual growth. As a general rule, always assume anything is possible. What needs to occur? Not our desires or mental ideas about it. We tend to believe the world of our conditioned senses. We tend to think our model of the world is accurate. But have faith and create a space for the beyond. Practice intuitively, identifying what is possible and what needs to unfold. Seek the inner teacher. When the chakras were first mapped out, this was seen and knowledge arose. The formative power was at work. Subtle planes are less concrete and more pliable to the mind's action, just like the subtle body is. We can think of the subtle worlds as having 3 types. The first are personal. These are made up of the subconscious and involve your memory and conditioning. We can see these in psychological types of dreams. The second type are shared by groups of beings that we connect to through the subliminal consciousness. The third are universal worlds of the cosmic self, where things are experienced with awareness of the oneness. When you experience the cosmic self, you experience being in all things or recognize the self in all things, far from the confined space of your individual thoughts, emotions, and sense inputs. This might begin with only a feeling of the bliss within all things, or a feeling of being connected to nature. Some types of dreams are experiences of the subtle planes, and others symbolize these experiences. Physical reality can also symbolize the same deeper ideas. For instance, my friend dreamed of a woman she had seen at work. In the dream, there was something about a cookie, and the woman sat down and they talked. Then, after writing down the dream, she got up and went to work while she was in the cafeteria debating whether to go and get the big chocolate chip cookie. She saw the woman from her dream come up and sit down across from her, and they began talking. It turns out they were the same age, grew up in the same city hundreds of miles away, and attended many of the same concerts. There was a hidden symmetry. There is the dream and the meaning of the dream. There is a reason why this happened. The symbolism of the chakras exist in these shared worlds. The lotuses exist both as subtle structures and are also symbolic forms, but we need to examine what is meant by a symbol. These are not mental abstractions that would limit symbols only to a particular plane of action, the mental plane. They have a deeper truth and force behind them, deeper ideas. At one point, people would ask me to help energetically deal with illness. I don't do Reiki, but something similar that arose out of practice, and I found myself in situations where I could learn something. I was invited by a friend who thought I could help his wife, who had a cold. As I worked on her, I clearly saw the image of her putting a clock in a cabinet. I asked her if the image meant anything, and she said that she had put a clock, a gift for her husband's tabla teacher who was coming in a few months, in a cabinet out in the garage. At that moment, I knew and felt the energy release, and her symptoms abated. She proceeded to tell me that today she received her 2-year degree in computing. She already had a 4-year degree from a college in India. She was ill because she was confused. She had just accomplished something, but it wasn't very satisfying because what she wanted was to start a family. The clock symbolized having to wait. Our lives are symbols that represent the soul's and the universe's journey towards the divine. Notice that although I stopped a stuffed-up runny nose and headache, I did not solve the actual problem. There was no power or vision that dealt decisively with their situation. Simple knowledge of why you're sick doesn't necessarily cure it. There is a notion that everything that happens is for a reason, but it is also a play of forces working out their own individual agendas. Not everything reaches the level of speaking to something subtle. Not everyone in your life is there for you to learn. Potentially this is the case, but a deeper awareness is necessary. Ignorance and the material reality both come into the play of forces. One can also look at rituals in this way. Jyotish, Indian astrology, or the Gita with Krishna and the chariot. There can be universal symbols being moved or a relationship being kept open. The chakra symbols have a living quality. They are part of a shared world where the images are fixed in a given tradition. Some may have a different number of chakras, different colors, names, etc. These are all equally real in the subtle sense. Often practices within a tradition will have criteria for success, and teachers can tell because of the common experiences, such as actions in dreams or particular visions or an understanding that arises. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear, and often when they do, there are things that led up to the meeting. We can say signs, but this is because the student and the teacher are in a shared world and have been interacting even before they physically met. Depending on the type of practice, there are several ways of relating to the chakra symbolism. One is to concentrate and to know the chakra through identity. You hold the chakra image in your mind and witness what unfolds. This is often done with mantras. This requires high concentration levels, and not everyone has the capacity. Knowledge can come in a flash of understanding. A second method is to reflect and work out the meaning of the chakra, just like you would interpret a novel. This kind of directed thought also has to look at the experiences in one's life and see the connection, or you risk becoming lost in ideas and mental constructions. For instance, the antelope at the heart. The closest thing in my world to an antelope is a deer. Deer are often shy and you get fleeting glimpses, or they stay in one place and you can have a long view. In my experience, if you focus on the heart, they will stay still, and you can even approach them. If you start to mentally vibrate, such as thinking about the camera, they run off. I normally walk in nature with a quiet mind. Having done this enough times hiking, I have felt the mental vibration leave me. It's like suddenly shouting at the deer. This is part of the heart experience, and it points to going deeper to contact the part of the soul in manifestation. The moment where you make contact, the soul is present directly, and then it is gone. Each chakra has symbols that connect, not just creating associations and perspectives, but also expressing a deeper movement of truth. The deities with their various implements point to the actions and intent behind the consciousness. For instance, the goddess Rikini in the second chakra has a battle axe. This represents a decisive action to cut off a movement of the mind. The axe is used from the top down to chop. You don't tap something with an axe. An axe chop is a committed action. As if, once and for all, by the strength of will, you decide to quit an addiction or tell a family member to move out. Meditating on numerous tools will produce various experiences. Meaning can also appear in revelations, and at times symbolic images can be seen in a person's aura. Physical sensations, such as the feeling of the axe, also play a role. Each petal of the lotuses is inscribed with a Sanskrit letter, and the whole alphabet is inscribed on the petals. If these are chanted, or even just the seed syllables associated with the chakra, one can feel the area of the body. Focusing on the area of the body, such as emotions at the heart and thoughts in the head, will also put you into contact with that level of consciousness. The levels of consciousness can be simplified to broad ideas. For instance, the base chakra can be thought of as survival consciousness. The chakras can also be a journey of identity. In the first, we identify with our physical needs, the second with family systems, where we are in the tribe, and have emblems such as for our sports teams, and the third with individuation or establishing a home and identity. The heart is care for others, the throat finding a voice, and the inner eye of seeing something greater than the self. These all have their places, but they can also end up being another typological psychology and miss the experiences and interactions with the different layers. They are often given too much egoistic bent as to the hierarchy of development. It is one thing to characterize people based on traits and say they are in this or that level. It is another to feel where their energy is acting from in real time because we are familiar with it in ourselves, or to recognize the consciousness itself. Observing the action of the chakra is another approach. One can become attuned, for instance, to how the mental forces of the throat act on the world organizing things, or use the body as a ground for feeling energy or vibrations. For physical practices, the goal is awareness of the physical expression of the consciousness and how the physical contributes. You can develop an energetic sense through the body and feel where the energy or consciousness is coming from in a deeper sense than the love at the heart, fear in the gut, and thoughts in the head. This can be helpful in returning to states such as relaxed body and quiet mind, summoning courage, being sincere, or being an open and receptive to higher consciousness and spiritual presence. Each chakra is said to have powers when opened. There are various lists of these powers and many variations. Usually the lists acknowledge unknown ones. Powers are often for learning. Sometimes people morally judge any mentions of powers, making accusations of egoism and the like, but they usually have a purpose, as do experiences. Problems arise if you try to build an identity around the power. Most of the time they are helpful if you're in touch with the flow. They will lead to deeper understanding, a wider sense of reality, a more direct touch of the divine, or purification. Some are practical. For instance, a wandering seeker who gained the power of protection. They then encountered a Bengal tiger and used the power to make themselves invisible to the tiger. This had a lot of repercussions, including facing their own fear of death. Sometimes people moralize about powers in others out of fear because it will force them to change. Their ego doesn't want to deal with it. But I have known a number of people who awakened and made their turn towards the divine by having occult experiences or having a power awakened in them that led to experiences. If you experience levitation, then the law of gravity seems more like a guideline. If you experience a hyper-vivid lucid dream, one that is more vivid than waking reality, you realize at least that the mind is capable of creating a perceived reality without the need for the senses. If you have clairvoyance, which means clear seeing, then knowledge means something different to you. You can release yourself from your conditioned world of the senses and enter a deeper existence. Experiences are generally of two broad types, knowledge and actions. All sorts of visions or understanding can happen via knowledge. Subtle senses can become active, new awareness or streams of inspiration. You can potentially come back skilled in areas which you have no basis or training. Actions are when the energy causes you to do things, such as heat up, move, or suddenly speak. You can have spiritual experiences such as bliss, being timeless and eternal. Powers can be divided into three main groups: power of knowledge, power of will, and elemental powers. They can blend together. For instance, one teacher told the story of going into a village to spend the night. A young girl was very sick in the village, and this was in an era when there was no Western medical access. He found himself meditating on it and could see what herb was needed and how to use it to cure the illness. This is associated with the third chakra, which gives knowledge of the body. He then told the villagers who went and got the herb. She was better and out of danger that afternoon. Word got around, and the next morning a long line of people at the teacher's hut wanted to be cured. The teacher created a distraction and escaped out the back. He said he didn't want to be trapped in that role, though much later he helped organize the building of a hospital in a rural area. There is a flow to things. Other powers are associated with the Manipura, such as the ability to see things underground. Teachers often go to remote places and have people dig in a specific place to find a murti, a religious statue used for spiritual practices. Knowledge powers come into two types that can blend together in experience. Some are extensions of the subtle senses so that you can sense things, such as vision, hearing, etc., at a distance in time, space, or dimension. So you can see the aura, talk to people who have departed, see subtle energy movements, or the forces opened up by alcohol acting through someone. Another version is knowledge by identity, where you identify with an object or event and know its purpose or path. These blend into the powers of will. These can be divided into two types. One is an indirect influence, and the other is a direct one. When you are around teachers, you think, feel, perceive, and act differently. This is due to their energy and their consciousness. You have this too, as does everyone around you. Your body-mind system is able to resist many influences, and part of yogic practice is to train to be receptive to higher or purer energies and achieve equality to all experiences so that you remain in your calm, undisturbed state in the face of anger, for instance. A common experience is that depressed people can drain you of energy, or you can feel the pressure of suspicion when encountering police. Some academics can pull all the mental forces out of the space, but there are other people who can make you smarter by being in the room. There are more subtle and higher forces of which we are normally unaware. Part of the will is communication. If we know the herb is needed, we may also need to be able to find it. Its location can be sensed, or the need for it can cause it to manifest. Someone comes to the village feeling they needed to bring it. There's an indirect force for a happening. Note that the tantric traditions have mantras for many things, such as attracting herbs or gemstones used in remedial astrology. It is possible to have the Kundalini awaken attraction so that people are drawn irresistibly to you, even causing car accidents because they stare at you while driving. There are many stories of people showing up at the right time. For instance, I knew someone driving a motorcycle in the mountains. He saw the car ahead of him slide off the cliff. His motorcycle hit the ice and he went over. While falling, he saw his teacher in a vision. He was severely injured, as was the driver of the first car, but the car behind him on the road just so happened to be the head of the state's mountain rescue, and his emergency equipment was in the back of the car. He saw the accident, stopped, and rendered immediate life-saving assistance. These indirect actions happen by the force of being, and one can also learn to concentrate and direct actions of objects, people, and events. What needs to occur? Elemental powers allow you to manipulate the normal laws of physical reality, such as lifting extremely heavy objects without injury or withstanding elemental forces. For instance, you can gain the ability to walk on water, or be able to withstand the heat of the fire and perform rituals in fire pits. A common experience of Kundalini is intense heat, tapas. Some people become so hot that you can be burned by touching them. Some people can manifest or transmute objects or make it rain sacred ash. One teacher was at a program and asked everyone to wait in the room while he went out back and not to follow him. He was gone for about 20 minutes, and then he came back bruised and cut, with his clothes torn. As everyone stood aghast, wondering what had happened, the phone rang. Word came that one of the young disciples had fallen multiple stories during a construction project and was miraculously unhurt. Powers can result from a specific practice or arise indirectly, such as the ability to induce changes in the blood flow for a second wind or to hibernate. Some also result from focusing energy on the chakra. There are many possibilities. In the next video, we will look at the inner being and then the aim of surrender with physical practices. If you get something out of this video, please hit the like and subscribe. Until next time.